This is Millennial Money Mindset. If you want the fruits, you need the roots. Thanks so much for joining us. Why have energy bills gone up so much? This is what we're answering today. We're going to look at why energy prices have soared massively, why energy companies are making so much money, and essentially how you can reduce your bills. So have you ever wondered why your energy bills seems to be constantly on the rise? Do you want to understand how energy companies, oil companies, are making billions of pounds in profits every year? And are you curious about the future of energy and how it will affect your daily life? We'll stay right here because this is exactly what we're answering today. We're going to give you practical tips on how to reduce your energy bills to get more money into your pocket. So if you want more money in your pocket, then stay right to the end. This is Millennial Money Mindset. If you want the fruits, you need the roots. We are live on TikTok. We are on the Millennial Money Mindset podcast and the Millennial Money Mindset YouTube channel. Thanks so much for joining us. So we're going to start off by taking a closer look at why bills have gone up so much. So one of the reasons, it's because of supply and demand. So supply and demand sets price. I used to work on the energy. I used to work for Shell Trading. So you might be saying, why should you listen to me on this channel? So I used to work as a trader. I was a shift trader for Shell Trading for 7 years. So if you've seen the headlines of the papers of energy companies making billions of pounds, that was essentially our team that was doing that. We were making like millions of pounds. I used to make millions of pounds every year and I'll reveal how we do this. Our traders made so much money. And essentially how you can do this. It's a variety of factors, including supply and demand, geopolitical tensions, and other reasons why they've gone up are so the cost of fossil fuels as well. So it's a finite resource. We're going to deep dive into this today and essentially how you can. We're going to also go. So we're going to go through why the bills have gone up, what energy companies are doing for these kind of enormous profits, and essentially then finally we're going to go to how you at home can essentially reduce your bills, getting more money into your pocket. So let's start off by going to why energy prices are so high at the moment. And this is mainly because of supply and demand issues. So there's a number of factors, and we're going to go right into it. So North Sea oil and North Sea gas is where UK used to always get most of their production from. So the North Sea is north of Scotland, and there's huge amounts of reserves there that was discovered in the 70s and the 80s. And essentially that has produced and provided a huge amount of oil and gas for the UK economy. And this has provided billions of pounds of economical benefits from this. And essentially these supply is now dwindling. It's getting harder and harder to get easy access to this supply of oil and gas. And this means that with reducing supply and increasing demand, this means that prices are going up. So a number of factors are also because there's no storage as well. So if you look at other countries in Europe, so Italy have got huge amounts of storage, France have got huge amounts of storage, and Germany also have much more storage than we do in the UK. So they can store the gas supplies. So for instance, they tend to put gas into storage into summer months when the temperature is warmer and there's less demand for this resource, and then they can draw on this supply in the winter times when prices are high. But with the UK, we have next to nothing. Virtually, there's a number of storage sites called rough storage, and there are a number of storages littered around the UK. But compared to a country like Italy, for instance, there's very little storage that can provide this kind of buffer for when times are tough. So another reason why energy prices have increased is due to the war in Ukraine and Russia. So Russia is a huge supplier of energy, oil and gas, and the war has basically meant that the supply have been cut off. So there was a pipeline called Nord Stream 2, which was meant to go online, and this was meant to be diverted. This was meant to go around Ukraine and have access to Europe, but this basically hasn't happened because of the war. And this means that a huge amount of supply has been reduced into Europe, and this has pushed up prices. So yeah, this has caused huge amounts of the price to increase, and this is knocked onto the bills that you're seeing in every month when you get your statement through. So that's another factor. So another factor is money printing. So during the coronavirus, there was a huge amount of money printing by the Bank of England. So 500 billion pounds of money was printed. Let me say it again, 500 billion pounds was printed. And this was to basically secure the people went down due to lockdown, and people weren't the economical, basically we went into a huge recession. It was the deepest, darkest recession on record. And to kind of cover us for this, people went on furlough. The Bank of England printed loads of money. And this supply of money went into the economy, and it basically meant that the more money was chasing the same amount of commodities. So most of our gas comes from Norway, and Norway's currency is pretty strong, and by printing loads of money, this weakens the pound, and this is increased inflation. This is not talked about on the press in other I've watched other YouTube videos in research for this one, and also in online. No one talks about this, how much of an impact this money printing has on the cost of living, cost of energy, and cost of food as well. So why are your food prices going up? Because it's a lot of this is down to essentially the printing of money, 500 billion pounds. And there's a crazy amounts of money being printed in the USA as well, around the coronavirus and lockdown. Like trillions of pounds, I can't remember the exact figure, but trillions of pounds, these crazy amounts of money just being printed just out of nowhere. Just essentially this is fueling the supply of money. And this supply, as we said, supply and demand sets price. So if you flood the market with supply of money, same demand, then that's going to affect the price. This is going to affect the price of everyday goods. So the cost of fossil fuels such as oil and gas, these resources are finite as well. So their prices are set by a number of factors. So due to coronavirus, due to geopolitical tensions, like we said, the war in Russia, there's also other factors like natural disasters. If there's a natural disaster happen in I used to work on the trading floor, and what happened, there was a number of different, when it was really cold, I've worked on a number of times where there was pipelines that froze over because it was so cold, and there was pipeline supply from Norway into the UK that huge amount of supply wasn't able to be delivered, and that pushed up prices massively. So huge amounts of gas couldn't get supplied from Norway to the UK, and that made that supply was limited. And even if you got the same amount of demand, that's going to push the price up massively. So all these have a massive impact in the supply. Supply and demand sets price. So when I was working for Shell Trading, I worked on the trading floor, and one of my senior traders would always say, whenever I was asking a question, he would always say, Neil, supply and demand, it sets the price. If you ever study economics, the first lesson you always learn is the law of supply and demand. And you can look into other books like The Wealth of Nations, written by Adam Smith, and he basically he was the grandfather of economics, and he would also talk about supply and demand. Another factor that leads to high energy bills is the infrastructure required to produce and distribute this energy. So building and maintaining power plants, pipelines, transmission lines, this all costs money, and this is passed on to the consumer. So there's been a huge amounts of development in wind energy due to environmental factors, which we're going to see next. But all this costs money. more infrastructure required to produce and distribute energy, the more money it costs to require to maintain power plants, pipelines, transmission lines, and this passes on to the consumer, and this means this is in the form of higher bills. So another reason is environmental factors. So environmental factors, we are now in a different world. We have we're much more environmental conscious. We are aware of climate change. The amount of CO2 releasing into the atmosphere has to be reduced because the amount of CO2 leads to temperatures. These temperatures are going to melt the Arctic and Antarctic ice caps, and this is going to lead to flooding. Huge amounts of flooding is going to be caused due to this increased temperatures. So if we don't get a handle on this, the temperatures, the increase in CO2 levels, this is going to lead to huge amounts of flooding all around the world. And this basically means that these environmental factors, one of the big factors that are causing the CO2 emissions is energy. So you look at coal, the amount of CO2 emissions that are released by coal is huge. So what governments are doing around the world is reducing the amount of reliance on fossil fuels like coal, which is a huge generator of CO2 emissions. So because we're taking the supply of coal out of the equation, this means that other factors like gas is basically in much higher demand, because gas is a much less of emitter of CO2. And because of this, there's a higher demand for this gas. As we said, demand and supply sets price. So if there's higher demand for the same amount of supply, this is going to push prices up, which is exactly what we've seen. So higher prices leads to higher demand leads to higher prices. So another factor why we're seeing higher bills is Brexit. And this is another factor that isn't being talked about in the press. So whether the right-wing media doesn't want to talk about it because they were pro-Brexit, but yes, it's huge impact on our bills is because of Brexit. So Brexit meant that we have partnerships with the EU. We have partnerships with countries in the EU like France, Germany, Netherlands, Norway. As we said, these are huge amounts of suppliers. And what is a massive factor, what is a massive impact on the prices is temperature. So temperature affects prices. So when I used to work on the trading floor, I used to trade this natural gas, and one of the big factors we looked at was temperature. We used to have a weather person giving us a weather update every day, and when it's cold, more people are likely to turn on their heating. So it may sound obvious, but this is going to have a massive impact on the price. So when, a cold February morning, the amount of demand raises, demand for gas increases massively because of the demand. So people turn their heating on, central heating on. That means higher demand, which leads to higher prices. So, and because of Brexit, we don't have those relationships with the France, Germany, Netherlands. It makes it much more harder to have good relationships. It's going to have much more bureaucracy. We're not going to have the same contracts as we had before. A really good example of this is when I was working on the trading floor, and one day, it's really one of the cold days of in February, there was a huge spike in demand because of this cold weather, and I managed to source some gas from France. I made £940,000 in a day because of basically the quick decision that we went to try and get this gas from France. There was a pipeline that froze over in Norway. We didn't have that supply, and that supply was reduced. We still had a really high demand because of this. It was a really cold day, and we knew this was going to have a massive impact on the price that people were going to pay. So we went and sourced that gas from France. We went went with a begging bowl to France. There was a number of different companies like EDF and huge other different companies in France. We sourced that gas from France. We paid a lower price than we would have paid if we couldn't have got that gas source. And towards the end of the day, that price went up massively. And by the end of the day, I got a report in how much I made, and it was £940,000. But that's saving rather than having to pay higher prices in elsewhere, because we couldn't afford. You'd have to take money, gas out of storage. You would have had to switch over to higher cost fuel sources like oil or gas, but coal. But we managed to source gas from France, and we made a saving of £940,000 in a day. And we wouldn't have been able to do that, or it would have been much harder to do that if we didn't have the relationships with with Europe. At that time, we were still in the EU, and it was much easier to have that relationship and do those deals. And we wouldn't be able to do that in the same way as we can do today. So Brexit is another reason why our bills are being pushed up. So another reason why our bills are being pushed up is because of coronavirus. So the supply chain issues, it's much harder to, it's led to a much higher price because of that demand and supply. So the final fact is, so not enough investment. So the government have known about this for many years, and they've failed to make that investment into wind energy quick enough, or into other renewables, or into shipping. So liquid natural gas, LNG shipping, is another way that we can get gas from all around the world. One amazing advance that we've made is from the USA has now changed from a net importer of energy to a net exporter of energy, because they've found shale gas, fracking, and they've found huge amounts of reserves in areas in the USA, and now they're exporting energy out of the country. And they used to be a net importer. Most of their oil was come from the Middle East, and which is why they went to war in Iraq, but to secure that region. But now it's been a massive change. You wouldn't have even imagined it 20 years ago that USA are now an exporter rather than an importer, which is massive. So that's another reason. So why have energy prices increased? Supply and demand sets price. We talked about the reducing reserves in the North Sea. The North Sea oil and gas is dwindling compared to what it was like in the 80s and 90s. The other, number two, is money printing. Huge amounts of money printing by the Bank of England has led to a huge amount of supply being reduced. Number three is environmental factors. So we're trying to reduce coal, we're trying to reduce oil, and we're trying to increase renewable energy, wind, solar, even turbines, huge amounts of even hydroelectric power. There's a huge amount of supply of hydroelectric power in Norway, for instance. So we're trying to increase environmental factors like renewable energy, and this is a higher cost, and essentially ultimately it's going to mean more affordable and more accessible. But to make that initial investment, that's being passed on to the consumer. So we talked about Brexit was another reason why there was high energy costs, not enough investment, and the coronavirus. So there are the 6 factors. So you want to learn how you can play a role in shaping your own bills. Let's go into essentially, so energy is complex, it's multifaceted issue. And if you're heating on in the morning, that's energy. Every time you turn your cooker on, that's heating. Every time you turn lights on, that's electricity, and that's all affected by supply and demand. So the future of energy can help us form decisions and let's go into essentially why have energy companies made so much money. There's crazy amounts of profits. I got some Shell is the largest energy company, Europe's largest energy company, and they made 42.3 billion pounds last year in 2022. That is mental. As I said, I used to for the front pages of the news. Why are Shell making so much money? That was down to I was part of a team. Our oil traders and gas traders were making vast amounts of money. I made millions of pounds every year. As I said, one day I made £940,000 in a day, and that was vast amounts of money. BP reported a record profit of £28 billion, which is crazy. So this, with Shell, that represents one of the highest profits ever recorded by a UK company, and it's fueled anger with the amount of the tax being. So they also they get subsidies as well, which is kind of crazy. And yeah, if you look at the reasons why we talk environmental factors, what CO2 levels being increased, and essentially, yeah, there's a huge about why are Shell, BP, the other oil companies not getting taxed, because it's everyone's oil. It's not. It's part of the UK. It's not. It's there. It's being generated by kind of fossils and dinosaurs that have been kind of squished into liquid many millions of years ago, and it shouldn't necessarily be one company making all that money. So let's go into essentially why they're making so much money. And yeah, let's essentially look at the kind of intense scrutiny and debate. So do you think companies should be paying more tax? Put in your comments. If you're finding any of this useful or interesting, please like, please subscribe, and please tell a friend. My name's Neil Doig. I'm the founder of Money Tips, the host of Millennial Money Mindset, and the author of the book Millennial Money Mindset, which is the ultimate investing guide. It's a book about wealth, death, and happiness. It was short in Financial Times in 2018, and it was an Amazon bestseller in 2019. So don't miss out. If you want to get more money into your pocket, more time in your day, and more happiness in your life, then buy that book on Amazon today. It's available on print, it's available in Kindle, and it's available on Audible versions. You can learn while you go. You can learn while you're walking around, while you're doing the washing up, while you're on the bus or commuting, just by putting an audiobook on while you're listening, while you're walking around. And yeah, you can do that. Millennial Money Mindset is available on Audible, Kindle, or in print versions, and we plant a tree for every book bought. Let's look why these companies are making. There's a high demand for this energy. So as we said, coal has been, because of climate change, the amount of coal generated is reducing, and it's got to make that demand that's been that coal supply that's been reducing has to be made up elsewhere. So this has been made up by gas. Demand supply sets price. So if there's a higher demand, less supply of other alternatives, this is going to push the price up. So oil, gas it's an essential commodity in the world. If you walk out in the road, if you go outside, there's going to be buses that are being powered by petrol, which is a product of oil. If you walk outside, cars, this is powered by petrol, by diesel. This is petrol by oil. If you light your homes, this is energy electricity created from energy. It's a high demand, so we rely on it for our powers in our home. Businesses rely on this. Transportation, if you go on holiday, this is fueled. Your airplane is fueled by jet fuel, and this is oil. If you buy a bottle of water, if that's plastic, that's oil. If you light a candle, that's oil. If you use any kind of machinery, that grease is oil. If you go drive on the road, that tarmac is oil. We forget how much of everyday life is powered by oil and gas. So even if you brush your teeth, that plastic toothbrush is a byproduct of oil. So this is why it's in so demand, and this is why energy companies make so much money. So as a result, the demand of energy is constantly high, and energy companies are able to charge a premium price for this oil, and this is why they make so much money. So oil companies have a monopoly on in a lot of the world. So there is in the Middle East, there's it's basically called OPEC, and it's called the oil producing company. I forget what it stands for, but essentially there's a number of different countries. They all come together and they basically set the monopoly, a natural monopoly. This would be illegal in many other businesses, but who's going to stop the Saudi government from doing this? It's basically, yeah, right, but maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But yeah, this is a monopoly that many of the oil producing countries have. OPEC have a stranglehold on the oil supply, and by reducing the supply of oil, they basically pushes up the price. So every year, OPEC, this number of different countries of oil producing countries, this would be Saudi Arabia, this would be Iran, this would be Iraq, this would be probably Nigeria, Venezuela. These countries all meet up and basically decide how much oil to produce every year, how much oil to release to the market every year. And they basically restrict the amount that's oil produced. And by doing this, it pushes up price. And by pushing up price, this pushes onto your bills at home. This pushes onto your petrol prices in the pump when you fill up on your car. This pushes on to other food producing, basically pushes up the price of food. So things like fertilizer is also created from oil, and we use fertilizer to create food. And yeah, if the price of fertilizer is high, this is going to get pushed onto the price of food, and the price of food is going to be pushed onto the price of what you're seeing in the shops for consumers like yourself. So this is another reason. So the monopoly power that these governments have. This is, I don't know if this is right, but yeah, this is unfair pricing. This is potentially an abuse of power. But what can we do today as a consumer? We're not much we as a country are addicted to oil. We're cars, and until we move to renewable energy, we're still going to have this. There's going to be a monopoly on the. So another one is economies of scale. So because of energy production requires huge amounts of investment into infrastructure, equipment, lines, energy companies are able to achieve economies of scale. So economies of scale just means that by working together, they save money. So doing this means that they can save money, and basically even if they charge that price, they're going to save loads of money by distributing large quantities of energy, and they're able to operate more efficiently and profitably. So because Shell is such a monster company, they benefit from these economies of scale. Because BP is such a monster company, they basically save loads of money because they're basically these giant mammoth companies, and they benefit from huge economies of scale. And they also control, so Shell, as I used to work for them, they control the production, they produce the refinery, they produce the shipping, they control the pump. If you go to a petrol pump, so they control everything. So this is why they have a stranglehold over the UK and the world, because we're all addicted to oil. And yeah, this is until we move away from oil and to renewable energy, they're still going to have a control over us. And yeah, I'm a big believer in moving to renewable energies, wind energies. I wrote a blog about how on my website, moneytips.org, tips spelled with 2 P's. Go and check that out. We have produced more wind in 2022 than ever before in the UK, which is absolutely fantastic. But we've still got much more to go. We still need much more renewable energy if we're ever going to break away from the stranglehold of oil companies controlling the prices and controlling the bills and this cost of living crisis, This is not being talked about in the media. This is one of the reasons why I set my channel up, because there's so many things that are not being talked about in the media, not being talked about in other YouTube channels, not being talked about in the papers, and which is, this is the big issues. This is the big elephant in the room, the control of power by oil companies, because they have these monopolies, because they control every stage of from the oil fields to the producing side. They control the pump. They produce the pipes. They control the pumps. They control everything. And because they control everything, they control the price and how much we pay as consumers. And this is unfair pricing. This is abuse of power. And yeah, until we come together as a collective, this is still going to be the case. Another reason why oil companies have made so much money is government subsidies. So in many cases, energy companies receive huge amounts of government subsidies, and this means they boost their profits. So these subsidies can take a form of tax breaks. This can be other financial incentives to make it easier for companies to make a profit. So these oil companies are making huge amounts of profits. Let's go back. How much did we say there was? So Shell made £42 billion, and that's profits. That's not just revenue. This is mind-blowing. So £42.3 billion, and that's just 2022 alone, and that's being passed back to shareholders. So, and BP, £28 billion. And this is because they have a stranglehold over they have a monopoly over the energy pricing. They have control over, as we said, pump to pipe. They control all this, and they can afford to charge high prices. And not just that, the government give them subsidies. The UK government, oil and government subsidies hit £13.6 billion. So as people can't afford to heat their homes, people can't afford to feed their family, people can't afford to fuel their cars, these oil companies are making billions of pounds. And I said, I used to work for these oil companies, so I can see how they do this. So OECD, which is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, claims that from 2016 to 2020, the oil companies received £9.9 billion in tax relief, in new exploration and production, £3.7 billion in payments conferred towards decommissioning costs. So decommissioning costs is just when an oil rig is no longer profitable or there's no longer any oil there. They have to dismantle it and essentially make sure it's all environmentally sound and everything. So they receive huge amounts of money. Another reason why oil company is through speculation. So I used to work on the gas trading floor. I used to work for Shell Trading, and we used to make so much money speculating. We used to buy in the morning and sell in the afternoon, or depending on the prices. And because we had access to so much information, we had access to, it wasn't insider trading, but we had a lot of information, and we could do it in bulk. We could make huge amounts of money on the price fluctuation. As I said, I made £900,000 in a day. I made billions of pounds. Millions of pounds, not billions of pounds. The Shell made billions of pounds. I personally made millions of pounds every year through what we call beach swaps. So this is where we would swap at what we call the beach, where if you think at the UK, where the pipeline goes from UK to the continent, the Europe continent, we would basically pay, rather than paying for, you'd pay for what they call basically called ship. You'd pay to transport your oil from UK to Europe, and you'd basically to save you paying you'd have to pay National Grid this to use their pipeline. Basically, you could swap this oil and gas, or it was gas that I was using, with other counterparties, and that meant you would avoid paying these the pipeline fees that National Grid would pay. It's all legal. It's all perfectly sound. It's business practice. But I personally would make millions of pounds every year just by swapping with other counterparties and just working together as a business, as you would. If business is a team sport, and you would swap if you were bringing gas in, you could swap with other gas, other counterparties, rather than having to pay those fees, the pipeline fees. So the energy market can be highly volatile. So the price is fluctuating based on a wide range of factors. So one of the factors that we used to trade on was weather. So we had a weather person who would tell us. So for instance, if it was cold in the UK and it was mild in Germany, what we would do, we would buy up gas in Germany and we would move that to the UK. So we would essentially buy gas cheaper and sell it at a higher price, and we would do that within a day at huge volumes, and do that every day. We would make millions of pounds over the year, and yeah, that's how oil companies, energy companies, make so much money. So also because of geopolitical events, so if there was the war, for instance, that meant that huge amounts of fluctuations in the price. Because of coronavirus, there would be a huge amounts of change in price. During the lockdown, there was, because people were on furlough, people weren't in factories, people weren't going out, the trains weren't running, for instance, people weren't using cars. The amount of demand dropped massively for oil and gas, and this basically meant that the supply was still high, that oil was still flowing, it still had to be essentially, it was still being pumped by on the oil fields, and it had to be used. And oil actually, believe it or not, went negative. People were paying people to take away oil to try and store it because the demand was dropped massively. So people would make money on this, between the speculating on the volatility in prices. So prices fluctuating, and due to a huge amount of number of factors. Another reason is natural disasters. So when I was working as a trader, there was a pipeline that there was a landslide, and one of the pipelines got knocked out into Italy. And basically that meant that the gas that I was supplying to Italy couldn't be supplied because of that pipeline wasn't working anymore. So basically I had all this gas that I had to sell in a day. We had to do this in a day. So we managed to source it sell it in France. In the end, we lost out on that day, but other shippers made lots of money on this volatility. So this is how they make money. Huge amounts of money is made on high volatility. So another way people make money or lose money is other things like if there's any like fire, for instance. So I did a podcast, Millennial Money Mindset. I interviewed a trader who talks about how in one day he lost millions of pounds because there was a fire in one of the storage units. And it's a really interesting story. Go check out my podcast, Millennial Money Mindset. He's a personal friend of mine, Rob Smith. He talks about how he made millions during trading and how he lost millions as well. And it's a really interesting episode. Go and look at Millennial Money Mindset. And that's essentially how these energy companies make so much money. So in conclusion, the energy companies are able to make so much money due to a combination of high demand, monopoly powers, economies of scale, government subsidies, and speculation. So buying and selling at different prices due to a number of factors like weather, due to geopolitical factors, due to things like fire or disasters. And this is how, if you ever look at the front page and think, why are BP making so much money? Why does Shell make so much money? And these are the factors. And these are this is what I used to work at. I used to work on the trading floor. It's one of the largest trading floors in Europe. And essentially, this is what I do. This is what I used to do. Did it for 7 years. And some of these factors may be beneficial for the companies themselves, but they also lead to higher prices and which pass on to you, seeing it in your bills. So as the world looks to transition to more sustainable sources of energy, it's going to be interesting to see how these profits and business models and these energy companies evolve over time, and if they still make these vast amounts of profits. So that's essentially, so let's cover, we talk about how, we talk about why your price of energy bills are so high. We talked about what to do to make, why are they making so much money. Now we're going to give you some practical steps on how you at home can reduce your energy bills. So get a pen and paper, and we're going to talk about how you at home can save money in your pocket. So if you're thinking, no, I can't afford to invest, one of the best ways to do this is to look at your expenses and reduce your outgoings. And by doing that, you're going to save money in your pocket. So let's go through it. So here are a few tips to get you started. So first of all, turn off electrics when they're not in use. This may sound obvious, but if you're leaving the TV on when you're not even using it, this is going to add up. So small changes make big differences. So by turning off these electric devices, these devices are still going to continue to draw power even when they're turned off. So make sure you actually turn off the little red, sometimes you see a little red button at the top there. If they're on standby mode, they're going to be still using power. So turn them off when they're not being used. Turn off your computers when not being used. I remember there used to be so many computers left on overnight because even the screens, the monitors were left on. This is churning power. Maybe it doesn't matter if it's your company, but this is going to lead to kind of environmental benefits. If you can turn off these electronic devices, this is going to save you money in your pocket. So this is going to reduce your energy consumption and save you money on energy bills. So number two is to install energy efficient light bulbs. So this may sound obvious, but replacing your old light bulbs with energy efficient options, LED lighting, EFL, I don't know what that stands for, but these essentially are bulbs that can save you significant amounts of money in the long run. They can use up to 80% less energy and can actually last you 20 times longer. So there might be an initial higher cost, but over the long term, these can save you loads of money over the long term. So number three is adjust your thermostat. So turning down your thermostat a few degrees in the winter, or if you're using summer, if you're getting air conditioning, don't put it on so high. So this can save you a significant amount of energy in bills. Consider programming your thermostat. We have it coming on at certain times. So this is going to save you loads of money. And don't have it on, obviously, during the day. If you're out, don't have it blaring, heating on. Other ways to do this, use natural light instead of relying on artificial lighting. Open your curtains, blinds to let sunlight in. Especially if you're working from home, have those curtains open rather than having a light on. And it can also produce warmth during the colder months. So number five is, so make sure your house is mostly insulated. So reducing your leaking energy being leaked. So there's the Energy Trust is really good at giving you kind of hints and tips. There's a number of grants actually that you can use. Go to the Energy Trust website, and these grants, they'll pay you to insulate your house for you to reduce the amount of energy that you're using. Air leaks in your home can cause heating to work harder and will lead to higher energy bills and higher more energy being used, which will knock on to environmental, more CO2 being produced. So check doors, windows, check your insulation. This is going to check your also look for seals to prevent air from escaping. So also during the winter months, I put you can buy these they look like tin foil. We put them behind the radiator and that reflects the heat out. I also drained my radiators, so you can kind of reduce the sludge. You bleed the radiators. They're kind of make your radiators work more efficiently. You can look at placing your boiler. If you own your house, you can potentially reduce costs by getting a more efficient boiler. As I said, go to the Energy Trust website to look if you can be, you might be able to get a grant for replacing your boiler. Set the boiler times so you have a quick blast in the morning and kind of set it up when you come back. Don't set it, don't have it on all night. Have maybe, if you own your house, maybe look at replacing the windows, or get your landlord to replace your windows if they're really old and letting the heat escape. Look at if you can get these energy trusts, if you can get these grants for windows. These are all going to save you loads and loads of energy, and it's going to knock on to reduce your energy bills, and this is going to get more money into your pocket. So also send your meter reading to your supplier. So all these kind of tips, hopefully they're going to save you money. Another one is don't use tumble dryers. Use, if you can, especially in the summer months, you can put your clothes outside to dry, hang them up. Don't use a tumble dryer. Tumble dryers are really energy hungry, and this is going to mean that you're going to be paying more for your energy bills. So if you can, wash clothes at 30 degrees rather than kind of a higher hot wash. This is going to save you loads of money. So hopefully this has been kind of useful. So we've gone through essentially why energy bills are so high. We talked about demand, supply, setting price. We looked at the kind of the North Sea reserves dwindling, money printing. We talked about environmental factors. We talked about Brexit, issues over coronavirus, not enough investment being made into energy long term. We talked about what energy companies, why they're making so much profit, why they're making so much money. We talked about essentially they've got a monopoly over oil prices. They've got a huge amount of subsidies. We talked about £13.6 billion in tax breaks, in grants, in other financial incentives, and they have economies of scale, infrastructure, equipment. They basically, because they rely on, save loads of money on. So hopefully this has been useful. This is Millennial Money Mindset. If you want the fruits, you need the roots. Please like, please tell a friend, and please subscribe to this channel. This podcast is brought to you by the book Millennial Money Mindset. If you want the fruits, you need the roots. It's the ultimate guide to investing. If you want more money in your pocket, more time in your day, more happiness in your life, please go and buy that book. It's available on Amazon. We plant a tree for each book bought. I don't have other adverts on this podcast. I don't have other adverts on this YouTube channel. I do this full time as a job, so it really helps me out if you buy the book. It's a huge amount of value there. It's going to give you a step-by-step, a 5-step method to money mindset where you're not stressed and worried about money. So this is my name is Neil Doig, founder of Money Tips. We educate, empower, and money coach you to better spending, saving, and investing. So thanks so much. And yeah, as I said, please like, please subscribe, and please tell a friend about this channel. Take care. See you soon.